Hello, everyone, and welcome to part two of our endeavor with the LCD number and numbers demo. This is part two of a three-part series. In part one, we created a dialog that had a LCD number widget on it, and we used a QTimer control to make that LCD number widget update every second with the current time. You can see it there. I just ran the program we created in part one. So in part two, what we're going to do is add a label to the center of our dialog form and have that label change the image that is shown at a certain interval. We could probably do it a little faster than every second. So you can see the LCD number widget is there running. I'll go ahead and exit that program and come back. That kind of bothers me that the LCD number widget uses that very light gray color. So wanted to show you QT5 has a style sheet component. You can change the colors on individual widgets using the style sheet. You can do it here in the property settings. There is a style sheet setting here for the widget, I think. Let's see, yeah, right here. And you can set style sheet. There's a little builder here. You can create things there. I'm going to show you how to do it in code just because it's a little easier to set a selector in here. If you have taken HTML programming, then you will know all about cascading style sheets and using selectors in there. And if not, just follow what I'm doing here and hopefully it'll make sense in the code. So if we want to change something about our widget was called LCD number. You see it right there in the object inspector, or in Qt Designer right here. We can also see it right there. LCD number is the name of our widget. So we want to change some colors about that because it's bothering me. A little bit hard to see. So self.ui is the object context where our LCD number widget is located. And then set style sheet is the method that lets us change the style sheet. And so the style sheet is a string. So in here, the name of our class that we're setting is QLCD number. QLCD number. Now the downside to this is if you had more than one, you might be changing the style sheet on multiple LCD numbers, so be careful about that. And then our actual settings go inside these squiggly brackets for our style sheet. So this part here is called the selector, okay? And then background color, we'll set that to blue. And then let's set the actual color to white, okay? And you notice each thing has a semicolon on the end of it. So this is our style sheet to style that LCD number widget where we could see it a little bit better. Let's see if I typed everything correctly here. Oh, cool. Look at that. So we have our blue background and we have our white digits. So feel free to play with that in your project that you have to do this week that has a LCD number widget on there if you want to style it a little bit. Okay, so back to the task at hand. We're going to put a label. You can see here's the little spec. So label, we'll name it label number. And then we'll add these two buttons to start and stop the timer to have the images rotate through here, or animate if you want to call it that. So let's go to Qt5 Designer and let's put a label on our dialog. So there's our label. We're going to use this in code, so I'm going to go ahead and maybe set this up a little bit here. Let's see. Moving things around so that we'll have room for our buttons and our label here. Okay, so we're going to name that label number. Label number and hit enter to make sure that our change gets taken. And then we can change some properties with this. So we can go ahead and make it wind panel and make it sunken where we can see it there. Okay, so now we've got that label where we can see it. We'll take the text out. Okay, now if you remember from our image example, there's a scaled content setting where you can have this, Qt will scale that image up to be the right size for your label. So I'm going to go ahead and check that here. It's in the settings for the Q label control, and you can see where it says scaled contents. If you check that, it'll automatically resize the image to fill our little box here. So we've done that. We'll save everything. Now we need a couple push buttons on here. We'll need one to start the timer and one to stop the timer. And we'll use a separate timer. Remember we have one timer that's keeping our clock running. So let's go to the push buttons here, and we'll drag a couple push buttons to our dialog. So I'm going to call this one push button start, a triple click in there, S-T-A-R-T. Okay, so now I have a push button start. We'll go ahead and change the text in that to say start timer. You remember when we were working with these that the ampersand gives us a keyboard shortcut. And let's see if we can edit this a little bit. I clicked the three dots and I did that so that I have wrapped my text a little bit. So push button start, that looks good. Let's do another push button for a push button to stop our timer. And we'll get these resized where everything looks good here. So this is the one we just dragged to the dialog, and I'm going to triple click in there and we'll call that one push button stop and hit enter. And now we can change our text on that to say stop timer, stop, and click the three dots, stop timer. How's that? and perhaps the T would be a good keyboard shortcut to stop it. I don't know. Okay, so there's what we've got. So we'll save this. We'll close it and reopen it just to make sure that everything took. We've got a push button start, push button stop, a label number right here. We've got our button. Oh, that's going to bother me. Our buttons are not sized the same. Okay, so looks pretty good. We'll save this and let's start writing some code. So I'll switch over to Tawny. Already got the Python file open that we created in part 1. So in order to make this work, we're going to need to, if you recall from the example that we did to use a label to show images, we need to import the PixMap class, pyqt5.qtGUI, and import qpixmap. Need that. And we're also going to need to kind of delay a little bit. We may need sleep. So this is a Python library, from time import sleep. Okay, we've got that. So we're going to need to get those image files from Blackboard. And here I am in Blackboard, the numbers demo, and all the images that we're going to show here in this label are in this zip file called numbers zip. So I'm going to save that down to my numbers demo, and then I'll extract it. So I've got that saved now. There's my zip file. Now open it up, and we want to extract all these, and I don't want to keep the directory structure. So they're all extracted now. So let's see what we have. You see we have a 0 and all the way up to a 9. So those are the images that we're going to show inside that label. So now we've got some, I'll get rid of this zip now. Okay, so we've got our numbers images there that we can use. So let's get about showing some images. So you see that we have the timer that we created for our LCD. We're going to need another timer that we can start and stop. And so let's go ahead and do that. We'll also need a variable, a class level variable that stays alive as long as our class is alive, that has the current number in it. So self.current underscore number equals 0. That's going to be that's going to hold the number that we roll through each time to load in there. Okay, let's connect up our push buttons. We'll connect that to self.start method. We'll write those in just a moment. And self.ui.push button stop .clicked .connect self.stop method. Okay, whoops. So we've got those. Let's create our timer that we're going to use. So self.timer equals Qt core, just like we did before, QTimer, and it'll get a reference to self. Okay, so that creates our timer object that we're going to use, and then self.timer.timeout. If you remember, that is the method that's going to get run at whatever interval our timer wakes up. So timeout.connect, and we'll connect that to a method. We can call it self.timer tick method. So we've got to write this method right here, and we've got to write the start and the stop method. So let's get about those next here. Okay, so all this first one is doing is going to start our timer. So not much to do there, really. That's probably the start and the stop's probably our easiest thing to do. Self.timer, remember that's the object we created, .start, and we'll tell it to wake up every second. Remember that's milliseconds. Stop method, self.timer.stop. That's easy enough. Okay, so at this point we can start and stop our timer, but we haven't written the tick method, the method that actually runs each time the timer wakes up. We talked about, we connected it here, we just haven't written it yet. So timer_tick method. It gets a reference to self. Okay, so we're going to display images here. Okay, we need a display method that we can call. It probably makes sense to separate that out. So def display method. And we'll write this method where it takes a couple parameters. So it's gonna, every method we write has to get a reference to self. And then why don't we pass a file name in here to display. So I'll just call it file. Okay. And so this is where we're gonna use this method to display an image in our label. So first thing let's do is, remember that event loop that we were talking about in part 1? We want to make sure that our program is real smooth. So Q application dot process events. That lets our event loop for our GUI kind of have a moment to do what it needs to do. And then let's go about setting that label. Self.ui.label number dot let's see, we need a pix map first. Let's do that. Pix map equals q pix map file. Remember, we pass file here. So this is going to create a pix map for the file that we passed in. Fix my typo. Okay. So self.ui.label label number dot set pix map. Okay, that displays, or that loads the pix map into our label. We've set the scaled contents in Qt Designer. So now let's just make sure that this gets repainted. It's usually okay without this, but it never hurts to put this in there. You don't know how fast the computer is that is being used to, or how fast the video card is in the computer that is being used to run this program. So that causes it to kind of refresh, and then we'll yield control. I'll actually put another Q application dot process events. Okay, so that's our little method to display our file in our label number. So now let's go back up here and let's write some code to do this. So if you recall, we set this current number up here and we made it a class level variable, so our property. So we can use that. It's currently got a 0 in it, so right now when this wakes up, it's going to get that whatever's in that. So self.display method, and we'll go ahead and convert to a string, self.current number. Okay, so that's got the current number in it, and we'll concatenate that string with .png so that we can roll through these images. Remember, those images were 0.png, 1.png, and so on. So we'll take whatever's in current number and we'll display that, we'll build that file name that then the display method will show. So we've got that. Let's bump the self.current number plus equals 1. That'll bump it up by 1. And then let's write some code to roll it back to 0 if we get to 9, because remember, the only images we have are 0 through 9. So handle roll back to 0. Okay, so if self.current number equals 10, double equals. If we get to 10, we need to go back to 0. Okay, so that should do it. That should handle our incrementing our number. Now remember, this is our timer tick method, so this is not going to start running until we start the timer. So and remember, we connected it here to our timer. Okay, so let's try this out. No promises that it's going to work right the first time, but we'll give it a whirl. Okay, so we have our LCD widget. You can see that timer's running because the time's changing. Let's start our timer here. Remember, when we click that button, an image should get displayed in the label, and every second it should bump to a different number. So there's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, when it gets to 10, it's going to bump it back to 0, and it did. You see it reset to 0, and it's going again. Okay, so you saw how our button started the timer. Now let's see if our stop button works. Okay, we stopped it, and it stopped at 2. So that's part 2 of the 3-part segment. The next part we'll do is we'll actually show you how you could use a loop to do this, but if you do a loop without putting process events in there, you'll see how we could hang that method up right here. This is our operating system. Here's our dialog form, our Q application that's running. Remember, we had 2 timers that were running each time through the loop. Okay, no big deal there. But if we put another loop in here that's really tight and we don't do a process events, we can actually hang this loop up and it'll look like our program is just hung, which it really is. And so the way we could unhang it is to put some process events in there. So stay tuned and come back and look at part 3 when you're ready.